Okay, welcome. Welcome to Coaches on Couches, episode 4. My name is John Min. I'm your host with my co-host, Pat Goldsmith. We're here with a wonderful panel of very educated, knowledgeable gentlemen. Today's lecture will be called The Power Poets. We're going to discuss developing and maintaining power for vault and tumbling. That's tumbling on the floor exercise apparatus. We have Dan Baker from Star Gymnastics out in Texas. We have Tony Gehman, who's the head of Gymnastics Guru Consulting. He was the former owner head coach of North Stars Gymnastics in Region 7. We have Chuck Krause, who's out in California at Champion Gymnastics. And then Bill Roth, right here in Region 7 at Cross Point Gymnastics. And so it's a wonderful panel. The combined knowledge of the four gentlemen easily go over a century, but we won't say who's got the most years. So once again, I wish to thank everyone for joining us. Just a quick couple of notes. Here's their biography, just to get you a reference. Please look up any of them. They all have a wealth of information online as well. Some rules and protocols. Please make sure that your audio and your video is off. This way the recording gets smoother, sound is smoother. Also, there's no interference or some lag. So we just ask our panelists to keep their video on and their audio on. Everyone else will be mute. If you wish to address a direct question to our live panel, please write it directly to Pat Goldsmith or myself, John Min, through the chat group. We ask everyone to be polite and to stay on topic. The world of gymnastics is quite vast, and we only have an hour, so we want to try to maintain our topic. Just real quickly, next week we have another wonderful panel. This time the ladies will be joining us. We'll have Miss Val Condos, former head coach of UCLA, Betty Aquino, who was in the Barcelona Olympics and who was a national clinician. And then we have Nicole Langevin, a precision choreography, and then Brandy Smith, a perfect 10-0 physical. And they'll be discussing artistry, movement, and grace when it comes to women's gymnastics. So we have a wonderful session then too. So I'm going to basically open the floor. Let me just stop that real quick. Welcome again, once again, everyone who's joined us. And we're going to start our panel. So basically, the first question I'm going to ask, and these are questions that were either designed by myself or asked by various people in the audience or emailed to us directly. How much a correlation do you coaches see from vault to floor? And is there a way to kind of combine what you do on vault with floor and vice versa? And I'd like to address first to Dan Baker, please. And I'll just unmute you
Absolutely.
and you're ready to go.
I think there's 100% correlation. I think there's a lot of correlation between floor and vault. And I incorporate my floor and my vault together. One of the things I'll say a lot when I do a clinic is if your floor coach and your vault coach aren't the same person, you need to make sure they're on the same page, because that can definitely be a problem. The only difference I see is on vault, we go from a round off to the table. And if we have a bad round off, we're in trouble. On floor, if we have a bad round off, we can stick a back handspring in there and make a few corrections. But I definitely think there is a correlation.
Excellent. I'd also like to address that question to Bill Roth, please.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. You know, I'm shaking my head because I also not only work with girls, I work with boys also. And, you know, training the boys is a little bit different than when you're working with the girls. But I love it. I like how you were saying, I do have different coaches that work with different, you know, sexes, but they're all on the same page. And I think, Dan, you hit the nail on the head. It definitely makes it very, very important.
Thank you, Bill. We know Tony's had much success with vault too. So Tony, when you're looking at vault training, how do you distribute your workout on vault? Do you train vault every day? Did you mix it up? How did you balance it, please?
We do, we train all 4 events every day, at least once, you know, and then we try with the higher level girls to get back to the beam and the bars and then do trampoline or something in the other workout. But that doesn't mean we punch the board hard every day. We alternate, like we'll have a hard tumbling day one day, and then maybe light to medium, like vaulting timers and lead ups and drills and tramp things. And then the next day we'll switch it. The tumbling will get less and be more drills and lead ups, and the vault then will be very hard. And that's also, we coordinate the conditioning program with that too. When we're doing a hard tumbling day, then we do a a lighter, like we'll focus more on the strength exercises. And then when we do a hard vaulting day, that we'll have plyometric exercises and drills of that nature going on. So it alternates throughout the week. And we hit it pretty hard about at least 3 days a week of really, lots of vaults.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Chuck, what is your reflection on that? We're focusing, of course, optional right now.
Yeah, so when I started, I would vault every day and just go bananas intense. And as I've learned a little bit, I've kind of taken Tony's approach in going hard on every other day. And the days that I'm not vaulting hard, I'm doing more tramp work, more air awareness and conditioning than I am doing the vaulting. And we are on the same page as hard tumbling is light vaulting, hard vaulting is light tumbling, and so forth, just to give the kids some recovery in their legs and not, pound on them all the time. But I think for us, because we are a majority JO program, we have shorter hours. I'm still trying to get as much conditioning in with that every day, and then trying to limit the numbers. We do all soft landings. We do not do any hard landings for vault throughout the season. We just kind of stack up mats harder because I only have one pit for our landing. So that is one major difference, is we don't do any hard vault landings. But other than that, that's kind of how we move forward, if that helps.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you. Dan, same question about the hard and soft landings. How do you distribute that, or do you tend to focus on one more than the other?
Well, I've always had my athletes vault onto a resi. I mean, every gym I've been designed there's a resi behind the vault table. I do not have a vault table that goes onto a hard surface at all. When I want to get harder, I'll just put a 20 centimeter in there, but yeah, pretty much soft landings. And I've had no trouble transferring that over to a meet at all. I don't do a lot of hard landing vaults. It depends on what you're calling a hard landing. Mine always have a resi underneath them in the gym. And the only time that they vault on a mat that doesn't have a resi under it is if they're in competition. And as far as tumbling, I always have, most of my tumbling goes into the resi unless they're out doing a full floor routine. But I do try to at least have a pass out on the floor every day. It might be a full, it might be a double full. It may not be their full in, but they tumble something out on the floor every day.
Thank you very much. Tony, real quick, also, what do you think about the hard versus soft training?
Oh, I think that when you're going to bring out firmer landings, you're approaching competition, and you're going to be actually landing like doubles and full ends and things like that on the floor. The period prior to that, while you're raising the resi pit up and making it more similar to an actual landing, we're conditioning drills, like from a beam flipping onto the actual spring floor. So about 6 weeks before you're going to land a double back, we're landing from a height, flipping and landing. So the conditioning precedes the next step in the training, basically. And then we're primarily using the resi. We try to keep it, I don't like it to be soft, like kids going into foam. I don't like that too much. Only maybe throwing something new, but you tend to go down and into the foam instead up, and you want to always tumble up. So, we tumble up, and then usually like if it's level, then I have a 4-inch with maybe a piece of carpet back foam on top of that, or something to keep them real. And then maybe they'll flip that off and do it. But you see these kids, go to the meets and they have the pit landing, the straight leg landing. They're not working technique enough on landings, as well as, like Dan said, keeping up a pass all the time each day, at least even high layouts is something that you're always keeping the brain in touch with that. The brain will get very lazy. You get like Jell-O. And so those kids that bounce like that, they're not ready for competition properly, in my opinion. There should be more, technique on landing is critical. Like if you land one foot in front of the other for several years, we just had a girl that had to retire. She's a Georgian, had to retire. And I look back and she's 14 and she was landing double backs, with one foot in front of the other. So I don't know if she was favoring the bad one, you know, or just a habit, but that's too much pressure on a foot, you know, so you got to watch your technique as well. It's a combination.
Those are excellent points. Like you said, focusing on the tumbling and the hard landing while you're doing floor, focusing on rising the body to get the rotation and not relying so much on pit. And what's kind of interesting is that because of our situation, a lot of gyms will not be using pits because of the process of cleaning it and, you know, keeping gymnasts contained. So it sounds like a lot of the techniques and advice you're offering will be ones that will kind of be the status quo. Also, I think a lot of times we do tend to get this false sense of accomplishment when a gymnast can flip into a pit. And then when they go to the competition arena, how many times have we seen gymnasts, you know, kind of balk or come short or not do the best vaults, especially when you're developing those level 8s and 9s. So Bill, how do you see that transition from when you're taking your vaulters to that optional salto kind of vault?
I mean, I could just reiterate everything that these guys are saying. You know, I keep thinking of what Tony was just talking about the technique. You know, going to a harder landing or flipping or depending upon where you are at, you know, safety is going to be key with it. So, yeah, I don't know I listened to these guys. I don't want to be the dead horse. You know, I think that they've kind of touched a lot on things. So I could just sit here and go ditto.
Thank you. So Dan, now that we are kind of limiting pit use, how are you going to do that transaction? Are you going to try to limit pit? Are you going to cancel pit? Or how are you thinking about it?
No, I'm going to keep my pit. We'll clean it, do whatever. My gym, I have one gym that's brand new. I mean, so we've already taken everything out and cleaned it. Obviously, we'll address all of that stuff as we go forward. But I'm like Tony, I don't pit, vault, or tumble a lot anyway. When it's very brand new and I'm trying to learn have them learn some of the air awareness, I'll use it. But I put a mat in as quick as I can because I think that pits give people a false sense of reality. And when you tumble down, especially on vault, you should rise as you leave the vault. And if you're going in the pit, you're just throwing your feet down, and that's completely opposite of what you want. Same thing with floor. And my rule I always use with my athletes, and I've said this at a lot of the developmental camps and stuff, I don't let an athlete compete anything unless they can do it 8 inches above the competition surface on a resi or whatever. And that's minimum. I mean, I'll put an 8-incher on top of my competition landing. If they can't over rotate a layout on that, I'm not twisting or whatever. So I work up, but I work up soft. So I don't know if that makes any sense. So I don't know if I did not have a pit, I would sure drill an awful lot. And I think the other challenge we're going to have is we may not just have lack of use of pits, there may become some less spotting going on. And that's a concern. That concerns me a lot. I think what we need to probably consider is wearing gloves. I mean, like Al Fong has done for years, because you still need to shape your athletes and keep your hands on them for safety. So I think that's an issue we're going to have to address as we go along. But one thing I want to say real quick, Tony touched on it. And like I told you, I've done several lectures. Physical preparation is way more important than skills. You have to be physically prepared to perform the skills you're doing. So I think the physical preparation and the conditioning stuff is way more important than the skills you're actually doing. Hope that answered your question.
Those are excellent. And with all this time off, we're hoping our athletes are really conditioning, doing their Zoom assignments or online assignments and really keeping fit, because like you said, that gives them a strong advantage going back into the gym. So Chuck, how are you going to perceive with your pit and your spotting and all those kind of difficulties once you open?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, I'm not trying to open a big can of worms here, but what they did with our level 7 vaults and having them start to train up onto the resis has kind of spoken volumes for what we will be doing. You know, doing timers up and doing drills off to the side will help do more numbers, safe numbers, and help us drill and really repetitive and clean up all the pre-stuff before the post. one of my big philosophies is if A is good, B is better, and C is probably going to be great. But if A is bad, B is uh-oh, and C is duck. So if we can really finite and make A and B really good, which is the timer, the flip will take care of itself. So we're going to be doing a lot of flipping up for vaults and for tumbling. I'm going to try my best not to use the free foam as much as possible. I agree that there's going to be a certain point with some kids, they just need that first initial go. I haven't figured out how I want to do that as far as sanitary wise yet, but I do believe that there'll be a lot of going up onto mats is going to have to be our answer until I come up with that solution. And like Dan said, physical preparation, making them strong enough and mobile enough. I don't want to say flexible, but making their range of motion, making it as clean and as strong in those shapes as possible so that they have confidence in themselves before they have to do the last skill. I think that's going to be our main focus, as it usually is anyway, is making sure that A and B are right, whether it's the round off back handspring from before the double back, or whether it's the half on, half off before the front for vaulting or whatever. So that I'm not trying to, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Chuck. Because we have so many different types of vaults and there are opportunities in the levels 6 and 7 for different entries, one person asks, is there a certain focus we should deal with when dealing with vaults? Like, should we focus towards the Yurchenko? Should we focus towards the Suk? Should we try to teach multiple vaults? How would you see that, Tony? You've had a lot of experience.
The younger they are, the more wide the base. So you want to try to do the 3 different families, I think, when they're young. Like, they're learning a handspring already. And then I think they should have some experience with a Suk, because you never know down the road what's going to happen. So for me, like, people are saying, oh, good, now we can do Yurchenko. And so, 8, 9-year-old kids doing Yurchenko, and they're doing a bad job with it, and they're not physically ready. Like, they can't even bend. Like, if you take a plastic ruler and bend it 45 degrees, that's about what they should be able to do, lying on the stomach, arching, in order to safely come on the horse. And a lot of them, shoulder angle, they got lower back problem. They're still scared of hitting the board. I mean, a Suk timer makes an excellent sense, or front handspring while they're developing the Chenko. I'm concerned that they're throwing it in there a little too soon. They should learn it, but they shouldn't go out and do it at a competition setting until they're ready, Like, I get it. You can put the horse low, and, hey, if they're safe, they should do it. But I don't think that you should sandwich them into having one choice. And besides, down the road, like, there's different things you want to be able to do. So if you're learning a good front handspring where the heels drive up, you might be able to get front handspring, front layout, full twist, or half on front, vault. So I'm always about the young ones learning the different families more, Same as tumbling. You should do front and back handsprings almost even when they're young. And then as they get older, they start to, go more towards what they're better at.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. I know with the TOPS program, the development, they actually introduced the concepts of the timer vault much earlier than the JO program did. Do you see that translation as very productive towards all coaches, Dan, or more towards those going the elite track?
Well, you have to look at who directed the programs at what time. So obviously the Yurchenko became the real point of emphasis during Marta's days, because the Yurchenko double full was basically what everybody was working towards. So that became, let's teach these athletes Yurchenkos at a young age. Myself and Ivan, we believe they're doing them way too young. That's my feeling. We're trying to look at changing some of the tops. I can't promise you things will change because that's not up to me. We propose it, goes through committees just like JO, and then they decide. Some of the things we think they would be better served at doing was just doing a round off back tuck or a round off layout off of the board to get rotation, as opposed to putting their hands on the table and some of those things. I think when you look at tops, if you've been to tops testing, The 8-year-olds look phenomenal. They can do a round off and shoot back across that mat like nobody's business. Then you stack the mats up, and the 9-year-olds look pretty good doing the round off back handspring. You add the table, and it all falls apart because they're so young. And like Tony said, they're really not physically prepared yet to do those. So I'll even tell you at developmental camp, we have very, very few under the age of 12 that can do a layout. I mean, they're still doing little pikes and stuff. As they get stronger and physically better is when the higher levels start to come up. You have a choice at tops. You can do a half on, I think. I mean, I think in the elite compulsory, when you go test the elite compulsory, you can do whatever, you can flip whatever you want. You can flip a Yurchenko, a Suk, or a handspring front. So I don't know, Bill, probably as a boys coach, I truly believe you should teach everybody a Kazamatsu at a young age, because it really teaches them how to quarter off the table and front twist off the table, as opposed to throwing a back twisting vault. So I think introducing a Kazamatsu at a very, very young age. And if you've been in any boys gyms, those boys are flipping them all over the place. So I don't know if that answered your question, but we just put it this way. In tops, we just enforce whatever they ask us to do.
Hey, thank you very much, Dan. Chuck, you had your hand?
Yeah.
Yes.
For my gym, I think we right now have large groups together. So I have like level 7s through 10s in one group at certain points. So it becomes very challenging to have multiple different families as far as moving the table, moving this, moving that, whatever, getting everything situated. I'm a big believer, and I don't know how everybody else is, you work on the individual kid. And if they're a great, strong runner and they're attacking the ball, stay with that handspring front. If they can't run hard and get aggressive heel drive, then maybe you working the Yurchenko is a better route for them to be more productive. I think you got to leave that open for everybody and try and develop it to each person reaching the highest potential on that vault. Will that make it harder for me as a coach? Yes, but will it make it more successful for that athlete when they're comfortable training the vault that they have shown more success in understanding? Yes, and I think that we have ranges from 10 to 17 years old. So if you're a JO situation, I think you have to leave that available. I don't know enough about the elite program, but it definitely looks like Yurchenkos are the way that they are driving towards. I mean, I've seen a couple handspring front folds or whatever. I could be wrong on that, but that is almost a compulsory type of vault. You also see the college kids, almost everybody, they devalue the full twisting Yurchenko because it becomes so compulsory. I love a handspring front. I love the traditional vaulting. That's the power and the beauty of it. I think we've missed that a little bit in JO gymnastics. So I'm going to try and do my best for more kids to go that route if they're physically able to handle it. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Chuck. Bill, going back to because you have that unique advantage of coaching both men and women, how do you see the differences of training vault between men and women? And do you also like to introduce Kazamatsus and other techniques to women's vault?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I have a young lady who is really not going to be a Yurchenko girl at all. I mean, she just doesn't have it, and I'm okay with that. So looking at her, we had initially started. She's got a great run, real powerful. So we started to go handspring front way. She knew how to do a Suk, but the handspring front, she started to get a little bit lost. And I took what Dan was saying. She actually cartwheeled on and came off towards a Kaz, and started to work that with her. And it actually seemed like it started to work for her. There's a huge difference between boys vault and girls vault. I mean, it's if you ever want to coach craziness, you coach boys vault, because there's no fear whatsoever at times, which is great. I even, Dan, you talked about teaching the boys causes. Absolutely. In fact, I teach them off a mini tramp initially, because to me, to do anything multiple twisting, you got to rotate. I even throw in there Tintica, because it's similar to the cause. You know, Tintica front half. It's similar to that. We do a ton of air sense also, but boys at times, because of how we can just throw brute strength out there, you can lack a little bit of the technique. You really can. So it's fun to see both aspects of it. But yeah, it's funny to listen to Dan and talk a little bit about the boys and going to the causes and listening to Chuck and talking about every child individually. Yeah, so.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Tony, I'm going to go back to you. One thing I want to know is some coaches have said there should be some prerequisites before actually flipping competitive vaults. Some coaches say that you should be able to double back on tramp or double back onto a resi. Do you have any prerequisites, or do you agree or disagree with that?
Well, yeah. Let's say handspring front. The one thing about the handspring front, which, you know, we've had a lot of them, and I don't usually go to that for the first vault because it's a very difficult vault. I mean, double front is what it is, and so it's difficult to land. Certain kids, yes, but not your average. You know what I mean? So if I have to choose a backup vault, that's when we'll go with Suk. And we've had Kazamasu, but also had, you know, full twist that happened to go the other way. Like Joyce was USA champion, but she twisted the other direction, you know, and she was weird with 1.5 on floor and all that stuff too. But it made her lay out full very high, you know, because she blocked up. So you go with, like Chuck said, you go with the flow of the athlete, but it's much harder for like a first flipping vault to do a handspring front, I'll just say, you know. So for me, when in doubt, a Suk is the easiest first choice, like a back while they're learning the other stuff. So I like, when we did a lot of handspring fronts, we had a trampoline, and then beside the trampoline was the spring floor, and we put a 4-inch mat on there, and every girl could do double front. If they were doing pike handspring front, they could do double front pike. And it was the same thing for double Arabian on floor. They all had to be able to do from the tramp to a firm surface, the landing like automatic. And for quite a while. And also when we were learning the vault, they would run out. I wasn't trying to stick ever the first 6 months of competing a handspring front. We just weren't. Same off bars. Step forward, out of it. You know, keep the weight like balls of the feet. Keep the hamstring active on the landing. A.B. said one time, if your hamstring is working when you land, you're not going to blow out that leg like that. You know, you got to keep it kind of working. So that's for that. For your Yurchenko, you need to be able to do double back somewhere. So level 8s, imagine as Yurchenko a lot of times is their first double back. And from the board, you know, and you're just bumping the horse. So I think very important, at least with the tumble track to a resi mat or something, having double back awareness is critical. So I would be doing front and back for both. Double front for the front and double back for Suks and Yurchenko.
Thank you, Tony. Chuck?
Just a real quick thing. As a beginning coach, I used to spot everybody on vault and flip them and never did doubles. I just figured I can power them through it, whatever. The last 2 years, I started having them do doubles off the tumble track into the pit or doubles off a vault board onto mats. I couldn't believe how much more that helped getting into the table. So if I could make one suggestion, doubling off of something to help them rotate is 100% should be everybody at least somewhere a requirement for Yurchenko vaulting, Suk vaulting, learning how to flip backwards and rotate, learning how these kids can rotate in a safe environment first before going off their hands and trying to flip, was a life-changing experience for me and my athletes, and how comfortable they got, how much faster they got comfortable flipping off the table once they already had those doubles in their back pocket was huge, 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 huge. So I just wanted to chime in and agree with Tony on that one. I just throwing that out there.
Yes, Tony, did you have your hand? Yes.
Just, you know, what Bill said about the mini tramp, when we were doing Sukes years ago, we always used the mini tramp. I didn't have a pit, you know, and the mini tramp is also good because you can move it anywhere. So you can take it over on floor and put it in front of the resi pit with the firm area, because if too soft is not good. You have to teach the body to react similar to the speed that it's going to happen. So you want to start soft, but then just like we said with tumbling, you want to build it firmer and firmer. So that's a good one for double fronts, you know, over by the pit. You can just move it onto the floor with a mini tramp.
Hey, Dan, can I get your input on this topic too?
Sure. I like double fronts too. The only problem is they have no value. So coaches tend to teach towards the value. Your Yurchenko full in the JL world is a 10-0. A handspring tuck front's a 9-7. Do I think that's fair? I think that's crazy. I think it takes a really strong athlete to run down and do a handspring front. So coaches go for where they can get the scores. Personally, I teach my athletes multiple things. Like Tony, I teach them to flip Sukes first, so they learn how to flip. Once they learn a Suk, then if they can flip a Suk, I'll let them learn a Yurchenko after that. And then once they can flip the Yurchenkos, then we'll look at a second vault. I personally do an awful lot of double layout work. I do lots of double layouts, tumble track, rod floor, drills for double layouts. I do double layouts, round off double layouts off of a board. My feeling is I'm trying to get those hips to rise and get that rotation. And it's interesting, if you're looking at a level 8, obviously she's probably not ready to do a double layout, but she'll go round off to the double layout off the board, and the first one will be open and the second one will tuck or pike to get around, because that's all the rotation she has. It'll look very similar to what it looks like coming off the vault table. Once they start to get the double layout, then the vault layout starts to happen, and so on. And all the athletes, I don't know, Tony's had a lot of real good vaulters too, but every athlete that I ever had do a double full could do round off double layout full out off the board onto a mat, and they could do a double full off the vault table. They had the rotation and learned and they knew the twist and all that stuff. So I do believe a lot of double backs. I think our progressions are backwards somewhat. I agree with Tony. The first double back you're going to do is off the vault table. I think that if we're going to allow a Yurchenko, we probably should allow a double back on floor. But those are, those are always philosophical decisions. But I do think, I agree with Tony. If you're going to do a double back off the vault, you should be able to do a double back somewhere. Tumble track, trampoline, somewhere. Very important.
Hey, Dan, since I have you, another coach has asked,
Yep.
sometimes is it better to just teach the pike vault and skip out the tuck and just progress from pike to lay?
No, I was the one who got the JO committee to allow the tuck and pike to be worth the same. And the only reason, this is no right or wrong answer. So when we talk gymnastics and we talk technique, Tony and I have been together a lot. We've roomed together. We look at vault similar, but then there's other things we look at that are a little bit different. No person's one way is right and one person's is wrong. It's just, that's the way you see it. That's how you get it done. What you're trying to do is get to the final result. How you get to the final result doesn't really matter. Some people have a lot of success teaching jump pike and getting it to turn into a layout. What I saw with a lot of these kids coming to developmental camp and a lot of coaches asking me in the lower level camps was, I cannot get my athlete past a layout because they hit the table like this for a pike. Once they hit the table, they were already in a pike. And on the way down, they were piking. They were never snapping to create a pike. They were already in a pike and on their way down. So I wanted to allow them to be able to tuck or pike so that the athlete that wanted to snap up and do an open tuck, if that was the way that the coach wanted to teach, then that's how we'd do it. So I think that's a preference on the coaching. I personally go through tucks to layouts. But I will tell you, nothing's written in stone. That's how I always start the season. I'm going to go tuck and then lay out, and then I have some kid that can't do very well, and I turn it into a pike. So, I don't know if that helps you with that answer.
No, thank you, Dan. Bill, let's ask the kind of a follow-up on that question. How do we take that athlete who's been doing tucks and pikes for so many years and then trying to transition to layouts and fulls?
Wow, that's a great one. I actually, and the reason I'm like this is when I did gymnastics back in the day, I was always taught open tuck. I was taught going from an open tuck to a layout is a little bit easier. My old coach, Fred Turoff, especially on floor, the takeoff for an open double tuck is similar to a double layout. You're just bending your knees. So what does that transition look like? From my standpoint, when I'm teaching, I'll use my son for an example because we were just kind of not too long ago working on Souk layouts off of vault. Could do a tight, could do a tuck, could do a pike, coming off. I would teach an open tuck, same technique from the waist up, and then I would have him just straighten his legs out. That's how I would teach it for him. So similar coming off, the snapping technique, going from that open tuck to a layout.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. Dan, do you find there's a correlation between strong twisters on floor with strong twisting on vault?
Not necessarily. I do think you have to know how to twist. So you need to be able to twist trampoline floor somewhere. I have heard this before, and this always amazes me. I'll have an athlete come to a camp and they're doing a layout and their coach goes, can she do a full? I'll say, well, how's her full on floor or trampoline? Well, she doesn't have one. The first place you should twist should not be on your Yurchenko. You have to learn to twist somewhere. Trampoline, rod, floor, whatever. And the real common one is I'll get, is she ready for a double full? Well, how's her double full? Well, she doesn't have a double full. Well, if you don't know how to double full, it's very hard to double full off the vault table. So I do think there is a big correlation. I do think you do need to know how to twist if you're going to twist off the vault table. Absolutely. Now, how you want to teach your twist and how you technique, how you do it, that is totally up to you. There's all kinds of different ways to come twisting off the vault table. Some people have different ideas. I like to think about quartering up and twisting out and front twisting. Not every kid can do that, so you have to have another way. There's different places where you want to place your arms. Some people have them down, some people have them together. So those are all technique issues and choices.
Yes, when it comes to twisting, there are lots of choices too. And in your opinion, because many coaches tend to agree with this comment, but do you prefer always front back twisting the same direction and about the round off side as opposed to the twisting side?
Well, ideally, yes, that would be great. But you do have the kid that'll come into your gym from another gym if you didn't start her that already goes one way and the other. And I'll give you an example. There's an athlete that's pretty good who round off one ways and twist the other, and her name is Simone Biles. So I think it's worked out pretty well for her. I also had an athlete too, Rachel Flam and Simone. They both do the Chang entry, and they both round off one way and twist the other. So it's possible. I wouldn't say it's ideal, but it is possible.
It's definitely hard to argue with results like that. What about you, Tony, that transition from the layout to the twisting for vault?
Well, that sounds different than what you were talking about. You mean just where you learn to twist? Is that what you say?
Well, your concepts on it, when to start it, whether you teach it,
Well, I think you should be excellent on trampoline. Yeah, I think trampoline should precede floor and vault like 6 months to 1 year at least. So by the time you're going to be, like Dan was saying, you don't learn to do a twist on the vault. You become an expert at it, at getting the air sense. And then when you get up there, then you can wait, and then you'll relate it to the trampoline. So for me, I like all the twisting and flipping done on the tramp somehow. And also from a stand from like a board on a panel mat to the pit. Because when you do standing back twist, and they do it, of course, off the table, but that's not the place to learn it necessarily. You do standing back twist, you set your body up fast. And if it's too slow of a surface, it's not as good. The board works nice because you come up quick and then you turn. And so, I believe front and back should be the same twist direction without question, because otherwise half in, half out, then you're going to get messed up. But they tend to have a direction that they spin better. So I like to just test them a variety of ways when they're younger. and see what their tendency is for the twist. Hopefully it's with the round off, and I think it's like 70 to 80% of the time, if you do left hand down first round off, you tend to twist to the left, even though they're opposite directions of twisting. That makes sense. But we've had both. And again, our top kid years ago, she could do triple fulls, and she did full in last pass, first girl in US. She twisted the opposite direction, and she did 1.5 step out to double back, opposite direction, but flared and kicked out. It worked. It's more about, I think, what they comfortably feel good with, like their sense.
Okay,
Thank
so
you,
we
Tony.
have a question from the audience here. Can you guys talk about how you build power and speed from the beginning for both vault and floor? What do you do when? So I know it's broad, so I'd like to have everyone cover that. Does anyone want to start? Okay, we'll start with Chuck.
What I start with, to be honest with you, is to develop the power. First of all, I watch a lot of videos from girls who I think have the strength and power. I think Mihai did an amazing video back in the day with, I think before Ali's first Olympics, he did a long thing on leg conditioning, and it was phenomenal. And how he did, and I think it was a USECA one there, John. You may double check with that, but I'm pretty sure Mihai did a USA or USECA leg strengthening one. It was phenomenal. That being said, we do a lot of air squats. We do a lot of PVC squats, PVC pipe, really light, learning how to do squats, learning how to do hip thrusters, learning how to do, I even go so far as to learn how to clean and jerk a little bit with a PVC, going over those to learn on the hip explosion, all no weight, all in compulsories, just so they learn how to be quick and aggressive. And I spend almost the first 2 years of compulsories probably around level 4, level 5, starting to at least touch on it. Not a whole, like maybe a month. We'll do each one for a month, no weight. And then as they get into the optionals, I'll start adding weight at that point. But I need to get those concepts early enough because they are hard concepts. And I'm going to take a really long time and be patient in teaching them. And then once they get the concepts, then I can start adding that weight. But they need to know the concepts first. So we're taking a long time because of their mentality and because of the movements that they need. But once they get those, I found that their engagement of the muscles that they learn how to use when they're doing those movements, as I translate it and as I help them understand why they're important to the tumbling, it makes them learn how to squeeze them better, it makes them learn how to activate them better, and it makes them learn how and why the conditioning is important. So that's how I help develop it. I mean, obviously we all have our favorite ones to go to, and I don't, numbers or whatever, that's totally up to you, but those are certain things that I do to help in developing it. And then, so that's just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Chuck. So Dan, what do you think?
I just condition a lot. I'm just going to flat out tell you, I condition my athletes. I do legs every day. I mean, maybe not hard legs every day, but 3 of our events are on our legs. And whether you think bars is not part of your legs or not, you're crazy. Your legs have to be tight when you swing bars also. So I do lots of leg conditioning as well as core and whatever. And we do alternate. And I'm not going to say we do hard leg every day, but I do some type of cardio every day, which does include legs. And I've had no problem trying to develop strength. I will tell you this. Some kids are fast and some kids are not. Some kids have power and some kids are not. So what they've always said is, you know what, technique is for the weak. If you have a weaker athlete, you better be very, very technical. If you have a very strong athlete, she may not have to be quite as technical because she can power through. But I do lots of plyometrics. I mean, there's all kinds of information out there on how to develop leg strength. You just have to do it and you have to commit to it. And, I don't know, Tony and Bill and Chuck feel, but when an athlete comes in and their legs are tired, if I have leg conditioning that day, I still do it unless they're injured. That's a different story.
Bill, what do you think about this?
Is correct. I mean, we do a lot of leg strength also. The only thing that I would add to is we add a little bit more along with legs, but the final finish push through of your ankles. Back in the day when we were told to run on a national team, we were told to we did a whole day of just running, and they called it pawing, like a cheetah grabs it and throws the ground behind you. So what we'll do little exercises like that to better help, just on top of the leg strength, just to finish it off. That was the only thing I would add to what Dan was saying, because I agree 100% with what he said.
And Tony?
Okay, well, it's a broad thing because of the age of the athlete plays a factor. If they're a beginner, intermediate, advanced. So I'll just say this, we always do like a format of the warm-up every day the same, that involves rebounding and punching and almost like rehabilitation type exercises. And then goes into some jumping and so on, but it's anaerobic in nature, not jogging slow a lot. Then one day we focus more on strength, like squat or single leg squat, or depending on the time of the season, and hamstring exercise, which we've never doing any hamstring exercise where you like lie on your stomach and lift weights or you're stationary, because they've shown now that a lot of the injuries in professional sport has probably happened because developing the hamstring incorrectly, and that it's more important about what goes on around the hip for the hamstring and the glute area. And so like sitting on a ball, one of those exercise balls with 2 feet and doing a hamstring, that's something moving to do the hamstring, and then going to one leg, or maybe with crawling across the floor with the sliders. Those kinds of things more simulate sprinting and the sport. So that said, we're doing a slow type conditioning that in the off season just works technique, and then a little harder. We build it up until it's really hard, and then we make it kind of explosive without jumping. That would be the one day. The other day we're doing plyometric. And like I said, our warm-up is plyometric in nature every day, but that's on the harder tumbling day. That's when we're doing the slower strength. Then the plyometric, we have stations that are working different things. So it's like 6 to 7 stations. I won't go into the whole thing, but it starts in the off season. I'll just give you one example, would be like jumping. We'll first start in the off season, just jump technique. And you might hold a bar over your head with your back to the panel mat and jump backwards, exploding with the arms coming up and hips opening up and then landing back on the panel mat. And then we'll go into deep squat jumping, like a roll back, jump up, something coming from below 90 degrees so the glute fires. And that's been shown that if you're above 90 degrees, the glute's not firing for that part. And then prior to getting ready for developing routines, then we'll start jumping more for endurance, and then we'll go into the season and maintain it. It's the same with the rebounding for us. We'll have step front, like step rebound, and then it'll get harder. Step punch front, and then step punch front, and then step punch front layup. Through the season, that particular station gets harder. So as we go through the year and through the career, the difficulty increases, so it's a much harder exercise, but with lower number than right before the season, and also when it's really difficult. I don't know. But we don't do a lot of focus on endurance, only usually a rebounding one station and a jumping or running with the block, like pushing first the block, or tube resistance, and then adding weights to that, making it very difficult to do. Then we take the weight away and we go off and compete. So there'll be like 2 stations, one rebound and one with the quad that are primarily endurance. Most of the others are about technique and explosion.
Okay.
But again,
you,
broad,
Tony.
because different age.
Oops, sorry.
Much.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, Tony. Thank you so much. Bill, real quickly, since we are starting to run out of time, and I know vault's a fascinating subject, and you guys have so much experience. Just real quickly, Bill, how much time do you spend on the pre-flight aspects of vault, the running, the steps, the rhythm and technique, hurdle distance, board placement, hand placement?
Well, it all depends on where we are in a season. Board placement, depending upon what vault they're doing, how tall the kid is, boy or girl. Hand placement, depending on, again, what vault they are doing. I want to say the first, I'm not going to say half, the first quarter of vault. I think Chuck was the one that was first saying, if A doesn't go well, the rest is not going to go well. There are times that we'll have a light day and you're just focusing on A. For me, it depends upon where we are in the season, what level, and so on and so forth. So I know that's pretty a generic answer, but I think it all depends on where we're at.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move a little bit now directly to floor since our topic was on both, but once again, the vault's been amazing. Dan, do you have any prerequisites or things that you like for all your athletes, whether they're coming up optionals, mid-optionals, advanced optionals, floor basics that they should always be working and training?
Well, sure. As you know, if any of you have watched me, I spend an awful lot of time on cartwheels and round-offs. And I want to perfect that cartwheel and the round-off in the snap of the back handspring. That's very important to me, where the back handspring snaps. The older they get, the longer the snap will get. So when they're younger, we want the snap down. So you can look at Simone now. Of course, she snaps behind her. She's also 22, 23 years old. We want, so we work on the snap. I work an awful lot of front twisting and front flipping. To me, that's a prerequisite. Ivan and I have talked about this many, many times. I think a lot of times we back twist before we front twist. And I think that if you're working front twisting, it definitely helps back twisting. So most of my athletes in my gym can do front folds and front double folds. They don't compete them all, but they all can work them off the trampoline and the tumble track and other places. So prerequisites for me are round offs, back handsprings with the proper snap. I like lots of whips. I do lots of whips and front twisting.
Okay, Tony, how about you when you're developing all those techniques, and if you also have some strong areas that you really tend to focus on?
Well, I mean, when they're younger, like I said, I think front and back handspring should be really developed pretty evenly, because it's just one is flipped over and there is a transfer from that. Once they can go up, once I teach them to go up, because when you're level 5, you're going to do a tuck or something, so you know how to go up. As soon as they can go up, then I want them to do whips. And I think front and back, like front whip, 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 and back whip, whip, whip. And you need multiples, and it's very easy to teach, like you just take, 2 or 3 8-inch mats, and you do round off back handspring across the 8-inch mat. Then you take the top one off, and then until they just go over the mat, but they're not touching it. And you can really work the shapes nicely then. But a whip back, the beauty of it, number one, it does help for the vault, but the whip back teaches, you can work on your punching technique. Like, the big mistake the kids make in the punch is the feet behind them and arching the body with a soft body. So the whip, you're like punching under with the position that you should be. And then when you're going to go up, you're just going to block that a little bit more, but it's not going to be arch. You know what I mean? It bounces like that. So you can do multiple whips and you're not bothering the Achilles. And the technique really makes the back handspring better also, because it's punching out of it round off. So and again, round off is the hardest skill, I think, because it's 3 planes. Like, we know aerial and beam, everybody can throw one, but how many make it in the major competition? Do you really trust the kids to do aerial layouts versus a flip-flop layout? Because they can throw it the same on the floor, but to go forward, side, and back, and then be over the top instead of around the side is really a critical skill. So Yeah, our highest level vaulters are doing cartwheels between the turns on the way back from their first couple turns. I mean, every day, you know, cartwheel, 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 cartwheel. And it feels, even the cartwheel mix, because they feel the 1-2 with the hands, and they pull themselves into the 1-2 of the feet and can run backwards out of it. That really makes that snap out of the round off effective, you know? So I believe that a lot.
Thank you, Tony. And I do agree, you know, working at with the TOPS program and of course at Parkettes and lead development, all that stuff, we worked lots of whips, we developed that. And you could see the whips translating to the Yurchenko vaults and the other techniques and lifting the hips and stuff. But I do find that sometimes gyms without higher standards, they don't quite understand the concepts of the whip, or they're kind of afraid of doing the whip or worried about the kids' ankles and everything. Chuck, how do you feel? Do you focus a lot on whips at your gym?
If I can share a quick story, I was at a NASIA junior qualifier at Orinda, California, which was actually hosted by Stephen Rybacki. And we were sitting there at a table afterwards, and I talked to Steve Sr. I don't know if he's senior, but Steve Rybacki, Stephen, so dad and son and Beth, and a couple other people were there. And I asked them, I said, okay, if there was an important skill, which would it be? He said, whip. That was 2 years ago. So guess what I concentrated on for the last 2 years? Whips, 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 whips. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. If I have someone who has had multiple decades of success with upper level kids, I'm going to listen to them. So yes, John, I am all about the whip on the tumble track, on the trampoline, off of our tumble strip into the pit, whatever I can get them to do safely and multiples of before I put them on the floor. That's what I'm doing first. The one thing that I want to say also, I know you kind of asked me this question, but Tony hit on it a little bit. As a younger coach, I always wanted them to get their feet to the ground on their round off and on their back handspring. And now I'm realizing I need them to get their chest up. And I think that's a common mistake from us younger coaches, is the speed is the shoulders driving and the butt squeezing to get their chest up. So round off up instead of feet down. And I wanted to kind of touch base on that, because too many people are getting their feet down and their chest stays down. And then they're throwing their head back to create that speed in those lower level kids. And then we all have to go fix it when they're level 7s, level 8s or whatever, or Hopes kids or whatever. I spend a lot of time on the cartwheels and the round-offs and the blocking off of their hands to get their chest up and their back handsprings, which then will hopefully help transition into the whip. And using their arms and their shoulders and their butt more than using their legs and their feet to get back down to the floor. Now, I'm not sure if I expressed myself clearly enough. I hope I did. But those are the two things that I am really focused on, John, is the whip that you mentioned, and then really getting their chest up out of their tumbling.
Right. Okay, so Bill,
that helps.
What about you, Bill? What are some focuses that you do, especially with girls and boys?
Similar to these guys, the thing I was going to say with the boys side of it is, as Tony was talking, front and back handspring. For the boys, I kind of a little different. There are boys that we have that don't have that kind of shoulder flexibility or back flexibility. And the way that it's going is I'll spend more time on rebounding. I'm a firm believer of front twisting. Most of my kids will learn. I was always taught you get up, you do that quarter, and then you're twisting forward. So I'm a firm believer in front twisting. We'll use tumble track a lot, and I'll basically say I want to see 5 fronts, 6 fronts in a row. For guys especially, all of their difficulty is going to be in connection. There is no more, well, there is, but there's not as much, there's no front handsprings anymore on floor, and there's less back handsprings. So, looking at from a boy's standpoint, it's definitely different on floor, what you're teaching them as they're going up. For the boys' compulsories, we're going, as soon as I get them out of compulsories, we're just going right to front rebounding stuff. But
thanks, Bill. So we have another question from the audience. Are you guys using the arm drop technique from the round off into the back handspring? We'll start with Dan.
Well, naturally, we don't reinforce dropping them. We do that as a drill. What we talk about is delaying them. So what happens is we don't want the arms to come up and reach the opposite direction off the floor. We want them to drag back and reach backwards to lift the hips up. So I wouldn't say you drop the arms, you just don't lift them so early. So what I've seen is a lot of people take the techniques that we're going with and they go way to the extreme with those. There is no one who has time to drop their arms down before they hit the vault table. What you want to do is you just don't want to lift them right off of the hand pad. And on floor, if you watch a girl do a natural round off back handspring, she naturally has them down to throw a back handspring. If you would ask an athlete to do a standing back handspring, what's she going to do with her arms? She's going to swing them to go backwards. She's not going to lift them to go backwards. So yes, but I wouldn't call it dropping the arms. That's if that clarifies that.
Thanks, Dan. Anyone else?
Chuck I think Chuck did you have your arm up?
Tony has his hand up.
Oh,
Sorry, I was agreeing with Dan. I was just with
okay,
Dan.
Okay. Tony then.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at when you want to turn something over, you know, like a layout, you're in the air on a trampoline, you're in the air, and if you want to turn it over, when you shorten the radius, either here or in your hips, it's going to turn over. So you'll see a combination of ways that people do it, like from the floor, but almost everybody is doing something to shorten their radius as they're coming down, and it helps get the feet through, you know. So on the vault, some people, you know, you'll see Simone, maybe her arms will be about here, and Maroney's here. It's just different ways people are getting up and over, but they do it, you know. And like Shirai, he almost doesn't bend his body very much, but he's all arms and even bends his knees, you know. So it's a part of turning over. That's what I'll say. And I think you do it more on round off to back handspring than you are on back handspring to back layout. You know what I mean? Maybe it'll be a little bit, because you still want to lift your arms up when you take off. You want to feel that lift, because that helps you jump higher. And if you do a little bit of this first and then do it, it's a combination of turning over and throwing your arms back. You know, so I think for vault, you'll see that happening. But Maroney didn't do it very much. It was interesting. She did a little bit, you know, but Simone's shorter and faster. So Mas used to say, how far do you bring him down? We would say, how far should you bring him down? He'd say, as far as you can, and be able to get him back in time. So that was interesting, you know.
Yes, Dan.
I have one thing. I think that the arm position isn't as important as what the chest looks like. So I've seen people, I'll try to turn sideways so you can see me. I've seen people have their arms down and their shoulder blades together. Where you're at is your chest should still be round, because as you swing, that creates your open. So having your arms down and your shoulder blades pinched together, I'd rather have your arms higher and your chest round. So you got to be careful on what you're reinforcing. If you're caught up on the arms, but you're not paying attention to what the shoulder blades and the chest are doing, you're going to run into some big problems, because if the shoulder blades are together, your hips are going to go forward when you're trying to go backwards. So the round upper body to me is way more important. That's why when Tony said Maroney could have her hands higher, Simone could have her here, some even have them down here, but they're all round. If you slow them down on the board, every one of their chest is round before they throw to create the hip open. So I think that's more important than where the arms actually are placed.
Thank you, Dan. Real quick, I'm going to stay with you, Dan, since we are kind of starting to be pressed for time. Do you have any favorite punching, rebounding, or setting drills that are kind of like your go-to swear by?
Yeah, like a back fist. Punching drills. No, we just jump. I mean, like Tony, I have a circuit that I put together. I don't think there's any one punching drill that's better than the other. I will say this, he said this earlier, the brain does get lazy. So I know Mihai, that's why he puts a lot of stuff in there instead of just jumping up and down off a box. That's why he'll add tuck jump, straddle jump, whatever. So the brain continues to work, because if you just do the same thing over and over again, the same punching drills every day, their brain's going to get tired and the body won't do them the same way. So I just vary it up on how I do it. Sometimes I jump up to a high surface, you know, to create power. Sometimes we have short punches. So I think I don't have a special particular one. I just use a lot of them.
Thank you. Thank you. What about you, Bill? Do you have any favorites, go-tos?
No, I agree with Dan. I think, you know, the brain, it's just like lifting weights. If you do the same thing day in and day out, your body becomes numb to it. You have to shock your body, for lack of better words. But we'll alternate it. I get bored very quickly, so I have to change it up. But I agree, it's the punching. Specifically, all of it. I mean, so.
Okay, thank you, Bill. All right, so we are starting to come to a close, so I'd like to address each person individually. So, Tony, any final words on tumbling, on developing power, any do's or don'ts experience?
Well, you get you strengthen awareness first, and then do the skill. So I like the trampoline while you're developing enough strength, and not just strength, but also being able to reach a position. Like I mentioned before, if you're trying to do your Chenko vault and you have shoulder angle, the angle that you're putting your wrists into is incredibly bad. And so you want to open the shoulders so the wrist is going to bend less. If you do this for several years, you have a fractured wrist or tendonitis. And the same thing with the lower back. If you have the pike in the hip with the shoulder angle, then the bones of the lower back are banging together. So you need the physical preparation, but that doesn't mean you don't do the awareness, you know, at that time. So if you're working trampoline and physical preparation, don't be so anxious to get these things into competition. The kid's brain has to be ready, not just what they can make a few in training, but a long time of making hundreds of them in the training, especially difficult skills. I mean, they take a few bad landings, they might never do that skill again for you, you know? So
Thank you, Tony. Thank you
thing.
so much. Final quick words, Chuck?
Okay, the one thing I would tell you is, if there's one thing, the kids should be almost screaming to let me do it because they're so bored of the lower level stuff. Meaning they're so bored at doing 8,000 on trampoline that they're wanting you to let them loose, let them go. You shouldn't be forcing them to do the new skill. They should be wanting to do it. That's how you know I feel that's how I know my athletes are ready, is they're asking me to take the next step because they've done so many at the lower level that they're itching for the next step, and they're confident in their skills to take the next step, versus me saying, okay, you're ready, and they're sitting there rubbing their hands on their legs, right, and sweating and stressing, where they're in control of that because they've done so many. That's when that lets me know they're at least going to give me an aggressive attempt to do that, to have a bigger chance of a more positive result, because I know they're itching to do it. I think that would be my one big to do. And then, like Tony and everybody else and Bill and Dan, condition, mobility, movement, and try and get it all done in the hours that we have. God bless you. Good luck.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks. Dan, please, final words?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll tell you, have fun. Gymnastics is fun. Enjoy it. Drills can be fun. Make it enjoyable. But the main thing that I would stress, other than we've already talked the physical preparation, whatever, is have a plan. Have a plan of what you're going to teach. Have a plan for each event. Have a plan for your gym. Plan and execute your plan. And your plan doesn't have to be my plan, doesn't have to be Tony's plan, it doesn't have to be Bill's or Chuck's plan, but have a plan and execute your plan. I find way too many coaches come to camp and then they go back and blow up the entire system they've worked on and try to reinvent it. Just add to it, adjust it, but have a plan and know what your plan is. Like Tony talked about, you should already have the foresight as a coach to know where your level 10 is going to end up when she's a level 4. You should have a progression, and it takes time. You'll have to develop your plan on how to get from, the athlete who's doing the the flat back all the way up to your Chenkos. But you must have a plan. That's very, very important. And there's lots of resources out there. If you haven't watched Facebook or whatever, there's so many people out there that have so many ideas that if you're stuck in your plan, reach out to somebody and they will certainly help you. I guarantee you. But my biggest thing is I don't think people plan enough.
Those are excellent words. I really do love those words. Finally, Bill, last but not least.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. Going last, I listened to great, wise young men, and it's great to hear what they say. I could just say ditto to them. I think for me, know your athlete. Know that each child is different in their own make. What it's going to take to motivate one child might not the other one. And trust the process. Gymnastics is a sport. Sometimes you have late bloomers. I speak from my own personal experience. Sometimes it takes us as a coach to just say something positive that can totally change an entire athlete's mindset. So know your athletes. To me, that would be the last thing that I would say.
Okay, thank you so much. So once again, on behalf of myself and Pat Goldsmith, I wish to thank all the audience who attended, and of course our panelists. These are four amazing coaches. I've known them for such a long time, and I never cease to learn from them, and I've never ceased to be amazed by their knowledge and their humility and how they express themselves and present information, especially to so many new coaches. And like we said, there is a lot of information online, but once again, we have to make sure that we get the right information, and we have to be guided. And I can let all of you know that these four gentlemen are definitely ones to listen to and give you awesome guidance. So on behalf of myself again, on Coaches on Couches, Volume 4, Episode 4, The Power Poets, I wish to thank formally Dan Baker, Tony Gehman, Chuck Krause, and Bill Roth. Thank you everyone for attending. Have a wonderful Mother's Day weekend. Enjoy the weather. And I hope to see you all guys soon in a competition sometime, maybe next year, right, gentlemen? So once again, thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and thank you for coming.
Nice.
Thanks, everybody.
This has been Coaches on Couches, Episode 4, The Power Poets, with Dan Baker, Tony Gehman, Chuck Krause, and Bill Roth, on Friday, May 1st, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The episode covered developing and maintaining power for vault and tumbling, hosted by John D. Min and co-hosted by Pat Goldsmith. Once again, we thank the panelists. We thank the audience. Next week, May 15th at 8 p.m. Friday Eastern Time, we have the Ladies Who Launch, Artistry, Movement, and Grace. We have a wonderful panel with Miss Valerie Condos Field, former head coach of the UCLA Bruins, Betty Okino, the 1992 Barcelona Olympian, who is also a national clinician, Nicole Langevin, who is in charge and the owner of Precision Choreography, who has worked with hundreds of thousands of athletes all throughout the country and has also been a national clinician. And then finally, Brandy Smith from Perfect 10-0 Physical Therapy and Performance Training. Once again, my name is John Min. I'm the USECA Video Chairman and also the New Jersey Top State Manager. I'm the owner of Magma Gymnastics in Region 7. And with me was Pat Goldsmith from New York, from Niagara Gymnastics as the co-host. Thank you and have a wonderful night.